welcome to the world's greatest Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast. This is a big one. Here comes the Spider-Cast. I am your co-host, Mike Allen. As always, I'm joined by...
Joshua Mervella. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Spider-Man Hobgoblin Lives from 97?
1997, yes,
Yeah.
about 10 years after Hobgoblin died. Now he lives.
Right.
Well, he was alive the whole time. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, this is such a special event that we have the whole gang here. First, we got G.I. Jolie. Thanks for joining us, G.I. Jolie.
This doesn't deserve my dance hall horn.
Oh.
But hello.
All right. And then also Bex Luthor.
I'm here, and you know how sometimes, also queer, but you know how sometimes when you're like a kid and you watch things and it means a lot to you and it's really, really important, and then you watch it as an adult and you're like, oh, that's really transphobic. I read this as a child and I was like stoked. This was the coolest thing. I shouldn't have reread it.
Yeah, I haven't reread it since 1997, and I think I'm in the exact same boat as you are, Bex Luthor, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I know that last week we made a huge deal about the fact that oops, I spoiled it.
Whoops.
That Andrew was returning, because Andrew was our original guest this week, but he pulled out. But that's okay, because we've got Adam Peltier filling in. Thanks for joining us, Adam.
No problem. Big gang, and I have to say this is actually going back, resolving some history for me, because I had issue number 1 of Hobgoblin Lives when it first came out, and for whatever reason I couldn't find the other 2 issues, so I never really knew how the story resolved.
Interesting.
And now, unfortunately, you do.
Well, it was a journey. It's a journey that lasted how many decades now? Way too many. But I'm very excited to share my thoughts on this limited series, and thanks for having me back to talk about probably my favorite Spider-Man villain, I'll say.
Yes. So, just for the record, we talked about this last week, but we'll just quickly remind everybody that the Hobgoblin was created in 1983 by Roger Stern. Roger Stern left Spider-Man around 85. Other writers took over, other editors took over. The mystery of the Hobgoblin's identity got completely lost in the mix. It was one of those things where, I thought that you were gonna write the story. I thought you were, and then everyone quit or got fired, and no one knew what was going on. And basically, one guy decided who the Hobgoblin was gonna be. Another guy killed that character, so it couldn't have been that guy. But then in last week's episode, we talked about how it was revealed that after Ned Leeds was killed, it was revealed that he was the Hobgoblin, okay? So that was official for 10 years. Then the Hobgoblin identity was taken over in the same issue by Jason McIndale. Jason McIndale became the Demon Hobgoblin after a while. Remember that? Where in Inferno, when he became possessed by a demon? And then somewhere in between, that in a story that I never read, he got this weird cyborg eye and cyborg arm. I don't know anything about this. This was after I stopped reading Spider-Man. But in this story,
I think that was in like the clone era too. That cyborg stuff was happening, which fits the theme, I think.
Absolutely, yep. Yeah, it's one of those ones where you look at it and you're like, I'm glad I stopped reading Spider-Man. But anyway, so
Speaking of spiders, there's a huge fucking spider on my wall.
Ooh,
he's coming in.
He's
coming in for the review.
Maybe you'll get some radioactive powers out of that. But anyway, so basically, when this came out, I was so excited. 97, this would have been, I was in grade 12 or something? This was like the second coming of Christ. I was like, oh my God, they're finally going to do it. Roger Stern's coming back to Spidey, and we're going to find out the real story, and it's going to be told what he wanted.
Wait, did you just call Roger Stern Christ?
No, I called Spider-Man Christ. But anyway, no, I called Hobgoblin and Roger Stern Christ.
Yes.
Yeah,
Hobgoblin is Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes
the
sense.
Second coming of Hobgoblin. Yeah.
The Father, the Son, and the Holy Goblins.
Yeah.
Father, Son, House of Goblin.
Yeah. So also, we should, before we jump into the plot of number 1, we should say, so this was, as we said, written by Roger Stern. It's drawn by Ron Frenz, who did not do the original run with Roger Stern, but he did take over immediately after with Tom DeFalco. So he was one of the guys that contributed to the confusion of the Hobgoblin identity, but we're not going to blame him. Now, we've got different inkers on every issue. In this first chapter, it's inked by George Pérez, who unfortunately just a week ago we discovered he announced that he's actually got inoperable terminal cancer. So, unfortunately, a very sad time in the comics industry, but now we can celebrate his art because he's inked this issue. So, we're going to quickly talk about what happened in this story. So, we start off with Spidey swimming in the Hudson River, and he's having like hallucinations about the Hobgoblin unmasking himself, revealing himself to be Ned Leeds, and then, I'm Ned Leeds. No, I'm not Ned Leeds. Blah blah blah. Peter Parker wakes up and he's in bed with Mary Jane. Now, for you continuity freaks out there, we should point out, not only at this time was Peter and Mary Jane still married, but this was during the time where they had just lost their baby, which no one ever talks about now. I don't think it's even acknowledged now, right? I don't think it's really in continuity that they lost the baby, but they had a baby that they lost that later on Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's also because doesn't their marriage get reversed?
Yeah,
right. I
I
think that's why today it's never really talked about, because it technically didn't happen
right? Okay.
anymore.
There was also May Parker, the Spider Girl. So I mean, in a way, they acknowledged it through that continuity, from the alternative universe character.
Right.
But I think you're right. In 616, after this happened, and after the reveal of Norman Osborn being behind the machinations of that all, no one wanted to reference that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and also they mentioned Aunt May dying, which of course Aunt May came back very soon after, and they never mentioned her dying again. So it's one of those things. You just gotta live with it, right?
She's not dead.
She's not dead here?
No, they think she's dead.
Well, it
was an actress the whole time.
Yeah, it's an actress.
But what I mean is, like, officially, everyone thinks she's dead, so she is dead.
Right.
They just bring her back, right?
Yeah, but it's like really, it's like soon after this. It's like part of the plot is like, oh, she's dead, and then she's not.
Gotcha. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So anyway, so Jason McIndale is on trial for his crimes as the Hobgoblin. Oh boy, there's a lot of exposition. There's a lot of really awkward explanations for what's going on. But basically, Jason McIndale's on trial, and while he's on trial, it reveals that he's not the original Hobgoblin. That's one of the things he does. We also touch base with all these characters that Roger Stern had written when he was on Spider-Man. So we see, what's the guy in the bar here? Conover. This guy Conover, who again was a recurring character in Roger Stern's run. I don't think he was really back much after that. Maybe I'm wrong. Then he brings back J. Jonah Jameson, who again, I noticed something. Roger Stern's characterization of J. Jonah Jameson is much different from other writers. He's not like the crazy, over-the-top, blowhard that other people depict him as. He's a lot more somber, which is, it's kind of refreshing. He's not so over-the-top, but...
And it fits with the story, I think, and what's going on. Like, this side of Jonah, we kind of see, like, snippets. So in this story, I think it didn't feel out of character necessarily.
Right. So Jason McIndale, he's being transported by police, and while he's like in front of the cameras and everything, they're like, are you, some guy comes up and he's like, hey McIndale, word on the street says you weren't the first Hobgoblin. And then Jason McIndale turns around and he's like, yeah, it's true, I wasn't the first. I had that loser killed and took over his gig. It was easy. You want to know more? Ask her. The first Hobgoblin was her husband, Ned Leeds. So the public at this time did not know or did not know that Ned Leeds was supposed to be the Hobgoblin, but now they do. So then that, leads everyone to speculate, blah, blah, blah. Peter Parker changes into Spider-Man. He's trying to protect Betty Brant from the crowd, so he snatches her up and swings away with her. They start talking and reflecting on what happened 10 years ago in real time, our time. And, basically everyone's kind of like, I never did really think that Ned Leeds was the Hobgoblin, right? No one ever really believed it. We cut over to two guys named Roderick and what's the brother's name? Roderick
Daniel.
And Daniel Kingsley, who again were recurring characters in the Roger Stern run. I don't think they were around as much then, around this time, if at all. But all of a sudden they're thrust back into the spotlight. We see that Roderick Kingsley has a full head of white hair and Daniel is balding, but they are twins. And Roderick is also the more dominant one of the two. We cut over to a guy named Dr. Harrow. And this is all explained at the back if you want to know how this all fits in. There's a little on the back page. They explain where all these characters appear. Like you go to the back and it says...
It's like a reference page.
Yeah. Jacob Conover was fired from the Daily Bugle in Amazing Spider-Man 416. Harrow, where's Harrow? He's back here somewhere. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But basically, Roger Stern's kind of just picking up right where he left off, right? So he brings, so Spider-Man brings Betty Brant to safety. They're chatting it up. Or, sorry, no, now he's chatting with Mary Jane. And, of course, Peter Parker's like, he's flashing back to how he went to Berlin with Ned Leeds, and Ned Leeds was killed while he was in his Hobgoblin costume. And then he's like, well, but now they're like, well, so obviously he was also set up, just like Flash Thompson was and Lefty Donovan. Ned Leeds must have been set up, right? So then we cut over to Jason McIndale in prison, having his own nightmare where he's in his original identity of the Jack-o'-lantern, flashing back to his fights with Spider-Man. Then all of a sudden he wakes up and there's someone standing in the darkness wearing a hood and sunglasses. And who is it but the Hobgoblin? But he's in disguise, so we don't actually know who it is. But the real Hobgoblin grabs Jason McIndale, throws him against the wall, shoots him with a finger blaster. And
it's called a hand blaster now. He's rebranded. Yeah.
Okay. Hand blaster. Sorry. He's using the
He
whole
wasn't
fist
finger
now.
blasting. He's hand blasting
Right.
now. Yeah.
So he
Full
incinerates
hand.
it. This is how powerful he is. He's able to reduce Jason McIndale to a skeleton. So this is probably Roger Stern giving a big F you to Jason McIndale, right? For taking over the identity of the guy that he created. And then so he walks up past all these guards that he's either knocked out or killed. And then he walks into the forest, puts on his Hobgoblin costume, and flies away. Then we cut over to Roderick Kingsley having flashbacks of his own to a scene that took place in, I believe it was Amazing 248, that famous time when all of the mobsters of New York were all gathered together, and he was there, and Hobgoblin came and was intimidating everyone, which doesn't add up because, well, we won't say why it doesn't add up, but we'll find out later. But something's fishy here. He wakes up, goes over to the mirror, and Hobgoblin's standing behind him, right? And he's basically like just intimidating him. And he's like, remember who holds the real power. He's like, if you play your part correctly, you'll have nothing to fear and new riches to enjoy. You see, I've just become the active partner in Kingsley International's little takeover scheme. So the idea here is that the Kingsley twins are now working with the Hobgoblin. So that's the twist of part 1, but it gets more complicated after that. So now we're going to go to part 2, and that's Becca's going to tell us what happens in part 2.
Yeah, it gets more really necessarily complicated for sure. There's a whole like subplot of like a bunch of business takeovers that I still don't get, but I don't think it's important. It's just like, just know that, you know, shady business dealings, right? So part 2 starts off with, we got Roderick Kingsley. It looks like he's like sneaking around, and he shows up to the Hobgoblin's lair, which he's either just recently set up or has always had that. So, and just been hanging out for 10 years.
Quickly reinstall his giant egg chair.
Yeah, he needs that egg chair. It's really, really important for his aesthetic. For his dicks out aesthetic, no. Anyway, so he takes his mask off in front of Roderick, so that means we know that Roderick knows who he is, which is kind of a big deal. And he tells the story about how he killed Jason McIndale, and then we switch back over to the Daily Bugle, where they're talking about the fact that the previous Hobgoblin, Jason Mercantile, has been murdered in his cell by, I guess, the Hobgoblin, right? Everyone's guessing it's gotta be the Hobgoblin. He's back somehow, even though it couldn't be Ned. And so Betty, who was once J. Jonah Jameson's secretary, is now a reporter. She's deciding that she's gonna go clear her husband's name, and she's gonna figure it out even if no one's gonna help her. And then Peter's like, oh, I'll help her, but then he turns into Spider-Man and figures Spider is much better help than Peter would be. So they're gonna work together to figure out to clear Ned's name. And I think
so
this
sorry.
is when is this the part where Betty claims that she knew that Ned was the Hobgoblin the whole time, or is that the previous issue?
I think that was the previous.
That was the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't add up. And then we go back to Kingsley and what's his face and the business dealings that aren't important, that I skipped over. But the important thing to note is these guys got cordless phones because it's the 90s now, baby.
It's an important plot point too.
Yeah. Well, it's just funny because we just read the 80s version of this story, right? So then we go back to Spider-Man, and he is swimming around, and he finds Flash Thompson and asks him to help him clear Ned's name because everyone once thought that Flash was the Hobgoblin. And Flash Thompson, #1 Spidey fanboy, is so ready to help Spider-Man. He doesn't even Spider-Man's like, hey, Flash. And he's like, what do you want? Anything? You want my wallet? You want my keys? You want my social security number? Whatever you want, Spider-Man. Here I am. So he goes to help him. And then these shady businessmen's dealings go up in flames because the Hobgoblin explodes an entire building, smashes a window, grabs a man, and kills him with gas. And so J. Jonah Jameson is watching this happen on the news, and Spider-Man is in Betty Brant's apartment. They're just like, he's getting them all set up, and then he does this really cool scene where he's like, all right, I'm gonna head out because Mary Jane is coming up to Betty's apartment. And then he quickly changes back into Peter Parker so that he could be Peter with MJ, and hilariously Flash is like right behind them, so like he almost found out who Peter is. That's pretty funny. And then you've got a little montage of their detective work trying to figure out who's connected to the Hobgoblin, who could be on their suspect list, who could be on their like list of people that the Hobgoblin is angry at. And they talk about Roderick Kingsley a little bit, and Mary Jane's like, oh, I used to work for him, blah, blah, blah. Betty gives everybody a spider tracer, because Spider-Man has provided them with spider tracers. And so Mary Jane goes off, and she's gonna go talk to Roderick, because she used to model for him. And then Peter, I believe, goes to speak to Ben Ulrich, and asks, like, just some generic questions. You see Mary Jane have dinner with Roderick, and then his brother Daniel shows up and tells him, he's like, hey, we gotta go. And so Mary Jane finds this weird. She's like, I always thought that Roderick was the strong one and Daniel was the wimpy one, but I guess it's the other way around, whatever. And then, so Flash goes to visit Liz Allen, who married Harry Osborn, who is now dead. This is after Harry becomes the Green Goblin, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So that's happened in the last 10 years, as Harry has become the Green Goblin and has died. So Flash is talking to Liz about, like, all the business dealings attached to the Hobgoblin, and then the Hobgoblin attacks Oscorp again. Because Peter thinks that, this whole time, Peter thinks that Osborn has something to do with this. Norman Osborn, who is dead, currently?
He just came back to life.
He just came back to life.
Yeah,
right.
After 20 years, yeah.
Of being dead, right.
This is a great time in Spider-Man history, but anyway.
And he somehow convinced everybody that he's a good guy.
Yeah, he's like, the Green Goblin day's over. Me, Norman Osborn, great. But he's not in this issue at all. So the Hobgoblin torches one of the businesses for Norman Osborn, and they're like, well, I guess it can't be Osborn because he wouldn't torch his own factory, which, I mean, yeah, absolutely he would, but whatever. So they're still trying to figure things out. Betty is... Sorry, I just read this and I still I have no idea what's going on. Oh yeah, Betty talks to oh, she goes on the TV show, right? Yeah. So Betty goes on a talk show to kind of lure the Hobgoblin out of hiding. She says that she has a bunch of documents from her husband when he was trying to figure out who the Hobgoblin was and all that stuff in an attempt to bring him out of hiding. And then what's his name? Conroy? Is that his name?
Conover?
Conover.
Yeah.
He accosts Betty in the street because he wants those documents because they're technically his, that Ned stole from him when he got fired from the Daily Bugle, I guess. So he assaults a woman who's talking about her dead husband on TV, and Spider-Man comes and grabs him, and they're gonna press charges on him. But then all of a sudden, the Hobgoblin attacks them in the middle of the street. He just straight up is here. Here he is. There's a little bit of a scuffle with Peter and the Hobgoblin. One of his greatest enemies is back to life, and they do just a teeny tiny little bit of a scuffle. And the Hobgoblin electrocutes Peter, and he falls into the river, just like his dream from the beginning. And that's the end of part 2.
Yeah, not much of a cliffhanger, but we
Is
saw...
Spider-Man dead?
Yeah.
Well, let's find out.
He
So
might be
number
dead.
3.
Part 3. So we have Spidey kind of swimming back up to the surface after being knocked into the Hudson, and he starts swimming towards a boat. We cut over to Betty Brant as she's going back to her apartment, escorted by a couple of police officers to make sure that she's safe. And the Hobgoblin is already in her apartment, knocks out the police officers, and kidnaps Betty. He takes her back to his lair. Spidey is... He goes back to the police station, and one of the police officers comes back with that evidence of the pumpkin bomb in the at Oscorp when Hobgoblin went and attacked there. So Spidey knows that something's going down. It's definitely connected to this thing that they were kind of thinking it was, where it was all these businessmen trying to acquire each other's companies. So he starts swinging around chasing the spider tracers, and Betty wakes up from being knocked out in Hobgoblin's lair, and she starts to interview the Hobgoblin. So Hobgoblin is kind of doing a little bit of a trade where she gets a scoop and can kind of figure out what's been going on all these years with her husband, and who the real Hobgoblin is, in exchange for those documents about Ned Leeds and the Hobgoblin and the Roxxon Corporation. It's Roxxon, right? Okay. So he kind of starts retelling the story about how he first kidnapped Ned way back when he was still in that using that weird battle van. And the first time that Hobgoblin is the one that falls into the Hudson. Ned follows him home trying to get a scoop, and that's when he kidnaps him and brainwashes him. And as this is being told, we cut back and forth from Hobgoblin and Betty to Spider-Man tracing down these trackers, which Hobgoblin has already found and told Roderick Kingsley to kind of spread out and get rid of them, essentially. So we see this old woman in an alleyway going through some trash, and he has one of the pendants with the spider tracer on it, realizes that that must have been thrown out, so he starts chasing the second one. We cut back and we find out more about how more about the backstory of the Hobgoblin. We cut back to Spider-Man. He's chasing a guy on a bike, a messenger bike, kind of webs him up and realizes that he's also innocent and knows that there's only one last thing, and there's only one last tracer, so you better get moving. We cut back to Ned, and so we cut back to Hobgoblin and Betty, and we realize that the Hobgoblin was behind even setting up or letting Ned go on this business trip to Ireland, and he knew about him getting assassinated and all that. And then he asks a question about the files, and she says, "Oh, I don't know. It's all coded." And he asks what the code is, and she goes, "I never figured it out." So then Hobgoblin says, "Well, how do you know what those files are even about?" So she kind of gets caught in her own lie, and he pulls a gun on her, threatening to kill her. And that's when Roderick Kingsley jumps in and points a gun at Hobgoblin, and he hand blasts the gun out of his hand, and Betty's trying to escape, and that's when Spider-Man swings in, and he webs up Roderick Kingsley and tells Betty to watch him as they kind of have this battle now in the streets of New York. Betty starts interviewing Roderick Kingsley as the Spider-Man and Hobgoblin battle is happening, and it keeps cutting back and forth. And as Betty is figuring out what's going on with Roderick Kingsley's confession, she pulls off a wig that he is wearing, and it turns out that is actually Daniel Kingsley, just as Spider-Man rips off the Hobgoblin's mask, unveiling that Hobgoblin is and always has been Roderick Kingsley. And that's kind of where it ends. Roderick Kingsley gets put into jail. They all watch him get detained and thrown in the slammer. And we kind of have this little epilogue with MJ and Spidey kind of reflecting on this whole event and how they're going to be kind of there for each other. And Peter reflects on his like past relationships, and MJ reassures him that everything's going to be okay. The end.
Ooh. So I'll just quickly say that, like Becca said earlier, this was the second coming of Christ. This was a religious experience for me when this came out. But upon rereading it, we all loved Roger Stern, but I found Roger Stern's dialogue very clumsy, very expository. I think that the plot was okay, but it was spread out. We didn't need 3 issues. I think we made 2 maximum, right? Obviously, I like what came out of this because the real Hobgoblin was revealed, but the way that they did it was not very smooth and clean.
I kind of liked it. I think maybe because I remember as a kid, I didn't like it, but I think it was because it was just too long and boring. Like nothing exciting was happening for me as a kid, so I was just like, whatever. So I was kind of expecting not to enjoy it. And then after reading it, I was like pleasantly surprised about of like how much I did enjoy reading this. I really like some of the like investigating that MJ and Peter and Betty and Flash do together. Like all of that stuff I think is pretty fun, and I like seeing them together and work on like the human side. I like a lot of the ideas of like tying it back to that one meeting where all of those businessmen were together with Hobgoblin, and it's like, well, he was there, so there's something's missing, something's not right. So they're kind of like investigating that, and they have like their list of people that they know were in that meeting. So it's like I really like that idea. I think, but like you said, Mike, it's just way too drawn out for 3 issues. Like nothing of substance really happens. Like there's no fighting or confrontation. A lot of it is just like Hobgoblin kind of going and confronting some of these businessmen. And it's not really even like anything is revealed. They're just kind of like crossing people off their list. Well, it's not this guy. Oh, it can't be this guy. He just died. Oh, it's not him. He's dead. So a little dry at times, but I thought all in all, it was for it being a story that is like taking all of these pieces from like decades ago and trying to repurpose it to retell and change an ending of a story, I was surprised at how well it was done.
Okay, I'll give you that. But I'll say more in a minute. But Adam, I want to know what your impression is of this story.
Oh, it is so messy. It really is. Like, all this is really Stern going back and saying F you to everyone that changed his original idea. And it's like, no, that was mind control. No, I was manipulating them. Like, any conceivable character trait that did logically lead Ned Leeds to be the Hobgoblin is retconned in the most... I don't even know how to say clumsy ways. Oh no, I brainwashed him. No, we FedExed him the Hobgoblin costume and the Foreigner. It's like, this is very, very convenient for you to explain all this. And then Dr. Harrow, this is one thing I want to bring up. There was an inconsistency in the art for me in the very first issue because I couldn't understand by the time I reached the second issue why they kept hiding the Hobgoblin's face, because I was under the impression, oh, it's Dr. Harrow. This guy has a mustache, a goatee, he has the glasses, he just killed the Hobgoblin, so it's gotta be him. No, it's just the character models were virtually the same. Only later on throughout issue 2 I realized, oh wait, it wasn't supposed to be the same Walter Light looking character. You know, it was a different character.
Yeah.
So,
I was confused by that too. I assume that this is just some dude, right? Like another guy that he brainwashed, because he has the voice modulator on him and everything that he used on Ned Leeds.
And yet he went into the woods and dressed up in the Hobgoblin costume. So I think this was a dropped plot point. I really do feel...
Really?
Yes, it was supposed to be someone else. And then they couldn't wrap it up succinctly within 3 issues. So they decided, no, it was just Roderick the whole time. Maybe he drew on a goatee, but like you said, why have the voice manipulator unless that was just a part of his Hobgoblin costume? I just feel it was a lot of setup that never paid off. Same thing with having Dr. Harrow there. He was there as a red herring for one issue and was completely forgotten about until briefly mentioned, I think, in that dream sequence in the third issue, and that was it. It was sloppy. It was sloppy to get around to the most anticlimactic reveal for who the Hobgoblin was. I didn't care. Who was this guy? I vaguely recalled him from those Stern issues, but
Right.
I really feel like there wasn't enough build-up to make that reveal satisfying.
Which, is that the fault of this story, or is it the fault of 10 years of other Spider-Man stories, you know?
Both.
Yeah.
I think it's both. I think that if this was the original idea, Ned was never supposed to be the Hobgoblin, then it should have been something that was done at the time in the 80s when they were writing that story. And for Roger Stern to kind of go back and rewrite it, it feels kind of like you were like, I think it was you, Mike, who said it was like a big F you. I'm going to tell the story that I originally wanted to tell and like rewriting history.
Here's the thing, though, is I don't mind that one bit because he was told to F off by 5 different people, and now he's getting his revenge. And I personally, since he created the character, I'd rather see Roger Stern get to do what he wants to do. But as far as the anticlimax of Roderick Kingsley, that's not really... I mean, he could have done a better job in this series, but he's coming back after 10 years. It's not his fault that Roderick Kingsley was sidelined, right? There's nothing he can do about that. He doesn't have any control over those other writers, so I don't mind that part of it. I just wish that... I do agree that the build-up was weird because it's like, well, who's the Hobgoblin? Is it that guy? Is it this guy? Is it this guy? Or is it these guys that haven't been around for 10 years that are in this story in every single page? Could it be them, you know? That's the one problem, I think.
Yeah, I just want to go off of this one other point, too, because I feel there was no reason to have this as a mini-series. I don't get why this couldn't have been a storyline in Amazing or Spectacular, with having a build-up of reintroducing Roderick as a character to organically build reader interest in him, and then reveal him as the Hobgoblin, maybe just having something contractual where Stern wrote those 3 issues of whatever this particular run was going to be. I think that would have been a much more satisfying way to reveal Roderick to be the Hobgoblin. Although we all know the real answer is that it should have been Mark Hamill as the Hobgoblin the whole time, because Mark Hamill was the best Hobgoblin.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, so we still got 2 more people to talk. So, G.I. Jolie, I know that, I don't want to reveal your secret, but you only read number 1, unfortunately.
Well, now I've read all 3, so...
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, well, we gave you time. There you go. So,
It didn't take long.
yeah. So tell us, what's your impression of this story, Hobgoblin Lives?
I think that I am in an adjacent seat to Adam, where I'm like upset that I'm upset that this happened to Roger Stern's original plan, but that he came back and like with a vengeance. One part that I did want to point out in the long list of ham-fisted ways that they decided they were going to unwrite Ned Leeds as Hobgoblin was like how they explained, or how Peter came to the conclusion that he couldn't possibly have been the Hobgoblin because he was able to be overtaken by 4 people. There's no way that could have happened because he was taking that secret elixir that made him invincible.
Well, the thing is... Oh, sorry,
him
go
and
ahead.
MJ are having this conversation over coffee, and it's like, stop. Also, if you notice, the red dot in the flashbacks is no longer a red dot. But they took the time to draw the lines in. But the colorist just made it all orange. That is, to me, the biggest fuck you. It was just so... It was like, just, these 3 issues just reeked of pettiness.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to not say it was... It's hard for me to not acknowledge that it was a little brilliant of Roger Stern to just be like, I'm just gonna get rid of all kinds of things that they cooked up for these characters, and I don't even care if half of them are dumb.
You know, he did cover his tracks. I'll give him that. And we did, when Hobgoblin got overpowered last week by those 4 guys, we were all kind of like, wait a minute. If he's the Hobgoblin, how is he getting so easily defeated? So it's almost like the writers were sloppy enough that they left little crumbs for Roger Stern to work with. So in that way, it worked out.
They left gigantic, like,
gaping holes.
whole Lay's potato chips on the floor.
Yeah.
Because, like, I too am also with Josh, where I like to see the scenes where, like, the Scooby-Doo gang gets together and Scooby-Doos.
Thank you,
it's
the Scooby gang. Yes.
Right? It's
Scooby-Doo this crap.
It's so ridiculous. Sorry, I cringe every time I see it. Every time I hear it. Oh.
Understandable. Also, I just want to bring up too, Flash is in this series at this time frame, his mid-30s, and he's still wearing a jacket with his own name on it. I just want to bring that up.
That's what kings do.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair.
He's still single though, so.
Well, true that. For a reason, but
yeah.
Yeah. So what about you, Bex?
Oh Jesus. What about me?
Give it
What do you
to
want to know?
us.
I was born 1992.
So you read this when it came out?
A little bit after it came out, like 2000.
Okay.
Ish. Once I got like really into reading comics because I was able to read. A couple problems. One, why did Roderick become the Hobgoblin again?
You mean
He's like, why now? Mm-hmm. What? Finally, friggin' Mercantile's pissed him off enough that he has to kill him and then come out of hiding?
Well, I guess because he's on trial, because Macendale's on trial. That's why, I guess.
I think he makes some weird offhanded comment about how because he revealed to the public that Ned Leeds was the first one, he got pissed off that it's going to get tracked back now to him when all of these business deals are going on. So he's like, fuck it, I'm Hobgoblin again, which isn't a great explanation. It's not good, but that's the one that they give in the comic. Yeah.
Because my biggest thing is, dude, you got away with it. They're like, oh, we know that there was another Hobgoblin before this guy, and it was Ned Leeds. Like, who's dead? Trail ended. You good? Roderick safe. You got away with it. Like, but he's like, no,
right.
I gotta come out of retirement to get caught.
If Betty had like talked about how she had proof that it wasn't Ned, then it would make sense that he would don the mask again.
Right.
But he didn't find that out until after he was already flying around on the glider, right? So like, yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Because if there was more explanation between like, oh, it was Ned Leeds, he was the first Hobgoblin, and Betty, like, she starts going through like back of her memories, and she talks about like him getting erratic and him becoming a different person and all this stuff, and they're like, well, wait a second, he never had super strength, he never had all these abilities that the Hobgoblin did, and like they figure out, well, it couldn't have been him maybe in a little bit better way, and then Betty goes on the TV show and she's like, I have proof that my husband is innocent.
Right.
And then in an attempt to bring out the real Hobgoblin, and that's what brings him out of hiding, is like, oh shit, I gotta silence this woman.
Right.
Spider-Man shows up, sting operation, right? Like Roderick is scared someone is going to find out his identity, because in the comic, the only person who might know his identity is dead. So like it wouldn't matter. It just bothered me. And then like there's not a whole lot. I wanted more like the writer who created Hobgoblin, this is his take on it, right? Like this is like his original story, but I want more of like why Roderick Kingsley became the Hobgoblin in the first place. Was it just for money? Because he seems like he's really unhinged and he's crazy. So like what what made him that way? What his brother is a wimp and he's not, like what's that relationship? Like it's like there's only 3 issues and there's so much filler and not enough at the same time. It's so weird.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the explanation you just gave is a logical progression of, because this happens, then this happens, then this happens. But this story, it's like everything it's like scrambled eggs. It's like nothing logically follows from another, like, right? It's just all, people are just doing things for no reason. And everything, like the end result would have been the same, but they could have done it in a more logical way.
Yeah.
I just want to, sorry, go ahead, Joe.
I was gonna. All I'll say is that's why, even though the second one, it feels like nothing really changes in the second one. I think it's my favorite of the three because it feels like the characters are trying to do something, like they're acting on the events and like coming together to solve the mystery. And the first one and the third one just feel like them explaining like and like rewriting things that happened in the past. Mm-hmm. Where the second one feels like they're actually maybe onto something and there's a story happening.
I want to go off a point Bex made because I think this is really crucial. The fact is, Jason McIndale, I actually prefer as the Hobgoblin because there's character progression. There's a reason he wanted to become Hobgoblin. He wanted that power. He was hungry for it. You could see his motivation. I felt as a character he was much more interesting. Roderick, as per a point, I don't know why he wanted to become the Hobgoblin of all identities he had to adopt, of all the methods he had to go through. Why that? Why all the methodologies of coercing people and then getting Wilson Fisk's son to become the Rose and all this other stuff? It just didn't really add up. One other thing that didn't add up, talking about the second issue, and this is the major beef I have with this one nitpicky thing. That dinner scene with Mary Jane. What did that add? Because the implication is something's going on. Roderick, he seems submissive right now to his brother, and there's an implication, something might not be right. Maybe his brother is actually the one who might be pulling the strings of the Hobgoblin, but in the end, that's not the case. So what did that scene actually do? Why was he being so assertive to Roderick if Roderick was actually the Hobgoblin? I feel like I said there was seemingly missed plot points or dropped plot points. I feel there were certain directions Stern was going to go in, and between issues, him or the editorial team changed their mind because this seemed to be a setup that had no payoff.
Wait, I just want to go back to that. Hold on a sec. What issue was that dinner scene in?
Number 2.
Number 2.
Yeah.
That's going on digital page 22.
Okay, because I thought the whole idea of that scene
was that the wigs were switched.
They were swapped.
Yeah, the wigs were switched. So that's why
she was talking to Daniel, not
So she was
Roderick.
having dinner with Daniel, and Roderick came up, and then Roderick says, "Roderick." So they're pretending they're each other. So that was the point of that scene. So it ties into the ending. What?
But there's only one thing. Roderick's not actually bald. They never show him as being bald. They never show him as having a hairpiece in subsequent appearances of his character or in this.
I assumed that they were both bald for some reason. They were just swapping the toupee.
I thought he's just wearing a skull cap or something.
No.
Yeah. I also just assumed that they were both bald and they just swapped the hairpiece.
Yeah, I was assuming the toupee was just like...
Well, yeah, they never... Like, Roderick's the one with the hair. That's the point, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I guess
and
so.
So the big reveal at the end of 3 where Daniel has the hairpiece doesn't make any sense.
They should both have hairpieces.
They should either both have hairpieces, or maybe the reveal would have been it was actually Daniel that was the Hobgoblin and Roderick was never the assertive one, which is what was being implied. But that was definitely not the case. And again, I only back this up with the fact that all future maskless appearances of Roderick have him with that hair.
But wait a minute. Okay, but let's be clear. If Roderick was wearing a skull cap in that dinner scene, then it does all make sense, right?
But they should show at some point, like, him pulling off a skull cap to show that he has hair.
Okay.
Otherwise, like there's it's when your plot device is a wig, one person wearing a wig and one person have real hair, you should probably, like, at least for the reader's sake, be like, no. They swap between the wig cap and the bald cap or something.
Okay.
Like,
yeah, because I didn't catch that at all.
What's that, Jolie?
I didn't catch that at all.
Oh. It could be excused, and I think you can explain it away, but I just think, going back to my original comment, sloppiness. I think
you're right.
Sloppiness going on here.
Yeah. I don't know. I honestly think that's easily explained by a skull cap, but if you think that it needed that extra step to show it, that's fine. But
does.
Yeah, I think now that you say that Roderick isn't actually bald, which I don't know why I just assumed that he was, and again they were swapping the toupee. But if they show him as always having hair and he's not bald from like now on, it doesn't make sense because their whole plot point, their whole twist is the hair. If it was just some like weird back thing, right? Like just like a red herring, it wouldn't matter. But it's the fact that we think that Roderick Kingsley is this person the entire time when it's not, right? Like it's not a red herring. It's like an error at that point, right? Because it's their whole thing is the wig.
I have a question too, because like, so in the first issue, the brothers are talking like, but they're like not. Nobody's dressed up as Hobgoblin, and like. Roderick's an ass, but he's not, like, hyper-aggressive when he's alone with his brother. But later, when he's alone with his brother, who his brother knows that he's the Hobgoblin, he's, like, threatening him and throwing him across the room when and I'm like, well, does the Hobgoblin outfit make him crazier, too? But then they just don't explain that. I was like, well, is he, like a Green Goblin thing, where, like, he puts on the mask and now he's angrier and Daniel's afraid of his Hobgoblin personality? Because he's just kind of like a jerk when he's Roderick, and then he's a murderous fiend when he's Hobgoblin. But they don't really, like, showcase that. They're just like, Daniel's a wimp both times. I don't know. It was just weird to me, like, that he drastically changes his personality with the Hobgoblin. I would have liked to see more, like, Daniel being maybe afraid of his brother, and that's why he's gone along with this for so long. Because, like, obviously he'll kill him. Like, it's just... There's not enough for a story that's specifically about a character. There's not enough character development for that character. The other thing that pisses me off. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, actually, I've beat this horse. It's dead. Go on.
Oh, I was gonna say, the other thing that made me angry is them writing off Ned Leeds being a shitty husband. Like, oh no, he was brainwashed to be, and it was making him aggressive. He just wasn't a dick to you, Betty. Like, no. He was being, like, yeah, she did cheat on him. Also, like, don't forget that. But, like, he was being awful to her. And I don't like that they're just like, no, he was mind controlled. He didn't mean it. Like, okay, that's gaslighting. But
here's the thing. Well, but it's also retconning what he thinks is an inferior writer, probably, right? Because just so we know, if you remember, Josh, when we started reviewing, actually in episode 1, I think we did this story, maybe we didn't, where Roger Stern explains 2 years worth of bad J. Jonah Jameson stories.
Yeah.
By saying he was being mind controlled through a radio that was sending signals to the Daily Bugle and making him crazy. So Roger Stern's used this device before. Roger Stern is a great writer, but the fact that in one story he used mind control and a twin brother with a wig as his, as his plot twists. I mean, he's still using all these soap opera, like B-movie cliches, but I still love his writing, but this is not him at his best, I don't think.
Yeah, I guess he did have to, like, shoehorn in the continuity. Like, you gotta give him props for at least not just being like, no, that didn't happen. This is actually how it happened.
Right.
And just saying that, oh, you remembered it wrong.
Right.
Like, at least he tried to fit in the current continuity of what was going on. Didn't work though. Like, that's my take on it. Like,
that's fair.
Oh, you tried. Here's a gold sticker, but you still have to, like, it still didn't pass.
Right.
I'm glad you submitted something, but it's not good enough.
Can I say one quick thing before we move on? About 10 years ago, we were reviewing an issue of Spider-Man, and somebody came out of nowhere and stabbed Roderick Kingsley in the back and killed him. And I was so mad about how quickly it happened that in our review I attacked Dan Slott and said that he was a bad writer for killing a villain that's been around for 20 years. And then he basically waited a year. He came onto our video and put mwahahahaha, and then that week the issue came out that revealed that actually who was killed was Daniel Kingsley.
Daniel.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember that.
Yep. Anyway, I just want to say that.
Because Daniel's dead and Roderick's not dead. I mean, maybe he's dead.
Huh.
I don't know what's happened in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Since we brought up the twins, I just want to add to my Hairgate theory because I feel this is really important. Going to the end of issue 1 where we have the confrontation between Hobgoblin and the Kingsley brother, Notice how he has hair. So even if this is Daniel wearing a wig casually, even though he's shown to be out in public not wearing a wig, it's very confusing. This adds into my whole spiel of why I think they may have changed their mind last minute about which brother was actually supposed to be Hobgoblin. Especially because he's having that flashback of being shot where I can't remember. There were so many twists and turns in this 3-issue series, but I do believe that was Roderick that was shot in the arm.
Well, here's the thing. There may be some plot holes in this, but I definitely know that Daniel was never intended to be the Hobgoblin because Roderick Kingsley was introduced in 1980, and he was always planned to be the Hobgoblin. And Daniel wasn't introduced till years later, so it's just yeah.
I agree with that. I just wonder if Stern initially thought everyone's going to expect me to make Roderick Hobgoblin. Here's a twist. And then decided last minute, no, I like my original idea best. I'm going to go back to that. And I don't know. I can't exist within Stern's mind. Sometimes when I read these issues, I'm very grateful for that. But I will say, it feels like I've been ragging on this a lot. I don't hate this 3-issue series, but I just feel there's a lot of sloppy execution in there. I don't think it's a bad FU to people who took over creative control for his character. I think it's a well-executed middle finger, but very sloppily raised, to give a very butchered metaphor. Anyway.
Yes.
So the one thing I'll say about that theory is in that scene that you're talking about, you can see on the bathroom counter a like mannequin head used for holding wigs.
Well, hot damn, my theory's busted. Okay.
I don't know.
Can you really?
What page is this, Josh?
On the page on
where he's washing his face.
Where he's washing his face, and Hobgoblin shows up behind him. Yeah,
page 33.
So maybe it's right before he took it off. But I think you're right. It doesn't whether it was his plan or not. I still don't think that the wig thing is a good payoff. The way it's written doesn't make sense. Like you were saying, Adam, with MJ's like weird dinner with him, and then like they don't explain that he has like a bald cap on instead. Like it's just so messy, and it feels like a cheap way to pull the rug out from under us. And the wig thing doesn't work. You're totally right.
Let's just be grateful it wasn't a clone.
Good point. Or that it wasn't Norman Osborn behind it all again, right? At least it's a separate
the
story.
whole time.
It would have made sense if they had they could tell the story about Roderick taking over Oscorp after Norman's death through Kingsley's corporation, and that's how he finds the Hobgoblin suit, and he inherits all the copyrights for the like tech and stuff used, right? So he can like, you know what, I'm gonna be Norman Osborn but better. I'm gonna run his company better. I'm gonna be this supervillain better, and kind of take that and like, you know, run with it. I think that would have been a much better story. They could have revealed that he was the Hobgoblin in the first issue, and then in the second and third one, explain how everything happened. I don't think they needed to do this, like, tune into the last part to finally be revealed. It's like, it's been 20 years of this. Do we really need to wait another 3 issues?
Yes, because then you buy them all, right?
I guess so.
Okay, so we've talked about like the plot and like the revelation.
I have one more point.
Oh, go ahead,
that's
Becca.
okay.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to point out that, does anyone else think it's really weird that this is his like final, like, oh, this is the true Hobgoblin story, and then he gets punched once in the face, webbed up, and then arrested?
Yeah.
I know.
Like, he just immediately like loses, like, the original Hobgoblin, the strongest, toughest, baddest there is, immediately just punched once and webbed up and arrested.
I know.
Ned couldn't have been defeated by 4 dudes if he was the Hobgoblin.
Right.
Spider-Man punched him once and webbed him up, and then he was done. Like, did he think that maybe once he got like unmasked that he like gave up because like his identity, like, just keep fighting, run away? It seemed really like anticlimactic, like the mask pull off and then the immediate defeat. I was just like, this is supposed to be one of Spider-Man's like most like craziest bad guys, like the scariest, like okay, like
Yeah,
right.
it does feel weird that this is like his comeback, the true guy, and there's no like master plan. There's no like, I've got Betty, you know, like you're not gonna get away with this, or she dies. Like there's no stakes at the end. They just like, he just gets punched. You're totally right. Even throughout the issue, this whole arc, it doesn't really feel like there's any stakes. Maybe besides when Betty feels like she's in danger, so they have to team up to like solve the mystery of things. But other than that, there's nothing.
Well, go ahead.
I just wish it was like better. Like
Yeah,
like
right.
he should have taken Betty and thrown her off a bridge. That works. Usually with Spider-Man, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Like,
the 197th woman to be thrown off a bridge in a Spider-Man comic.
Right.
but at least there's like a reason. Like
No,
something's
there's a payoff
happening.
for that. Yeah.
You know, when he takes Betty, he does fly by a bridge. I'm pretty sure. I was like, oh, are they? Yeah. When he picks her up in the apartment, it cuts to him flying by a bridge. I'm like, are they really gonna do this on a bridge again? Are they really gonna stick her up there? But no, they didn't.
Like, yeah, it's just very anticlimactic. Like, if you told me that Roderick Kingsley wasn't the actual real Hobgoblin, eventually, like in 20 years from now, they retcon this too, I'd believe you. I'd be like, oh yeah, he just got his ass kicked and taken away. Like, that couldn't have been
Yeah.
the original Hobgoblin.
They could have that
But it
scene
was.
with Peter and Mary Jane. Wait a minute, I knocked him out with one punch. Of course he's not the Hobgoblin.
He
Why didn't I realize?
disintegrated that man earlier. Who was that guy? He disintegrates a man fully.
True,
Like,
that's what I mean. Like,
into a skeleton, but then gets punched once.
this is
like-
the classic like trope of every like action movie where they make the bad guy out to be so powerful, but then when it's convenient, he just gets his ass kicked with one punch. Right? A lot of movies do this. A lot of comic books do.
Like, they could have been like, oh, well, it's been 10 years. Peter is honed his spider abilities to a point where the original Hobgoblin, Roderick Kingsley, is not a match for him anymore. But he disintegrates a man. So,
But to be fair, he was enclosed in a cell. So I feel like that's a little funny that this was his big FU to having Macendale take over the Hobgoblin role. Was that, yeah, I'm going to disintegrate him. I'm going to show that he's so weak by killing him when he's unarmed, in a cell, and he can't fight back. Yeah, I'm the true Hobgoblin. Wow.
Like I
should have taken
said,
him, thrown him off a bridge.
Eddie.
You know what? I take that back. Always throw them off a bridge.
Not just women, everyone. The men, the women, the children.
ABT.
Anyone
always
who
be
dies
throwing.
in a...
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone in a Spider-Man comic that dies should be thrown off a bridge.
Yeah, what if Kingsley's corporation was bought at the beginning, and he dons the Hobgoblin costume again by killing Macendale? So we see somebody killing the Hobgoblin and then taking on the costume, and then he starts kidnapping all of the people responsible for this, and then reveals that he's been the Hobgoblin the entire time, and he's taking up the mantle again.
That
after
would be a
he's
lot better.
completely desperate.
Oh, if he grabs Macendale at the trial and just grabs him and reveals that the Hobgoblin's back, baby, and
Yeah.
grabs him and kills him right in front of all those people. Sick.
You know, I also think another great way that they could have done this, and this is getting fanficky, is make it Ned Leeds. Why not have his death be fabricated? Come back. Everyone thinks I couldn't actually be the Hobgoblin. No, I can. This is how badass I was. He faked his own death to live off riches or whatever the case was, and that way you sustain that legacy of Leeds being the Hobgoblin. That's another way that it could have been done.
Well,
No
Roger
way that would have been
Stern.
done.
Roger
Sure.
Stern wants
Yeah,
his
someone else.
revenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I just think the iconic Hobgoblins are going to be Macendale and Leeds. There's a reason everyone is saying, well, when is this Ned Leeds in the Spider-Man movie is going to be Hobgoblin?
Right.
Well,
Just
by
right.
let him
everyone, I
have a
mean, like,
friend.
2 people know, but yeah. Well,
The 2 people who know that Ned Leeds was the Hobgoblin at one point, and that character's name is Ned Leeds, even though he has nothing related to Ned Leeds at all. He's more related to Miles Morales' best friend, whose name escapes me right now.
Genki leads.
Genki.
Yeah.
It's just Genki.
Okay, so let's talk about some technical aspects of this comic book. So, like we said, the art is by Ron Frenz. The inker changes every issue. I found it refreshing. I mean, I know that some 90s art was good, but I found this a nice little throwback to 10 years earlier with Spider-Man. I actually found the inking in the second issue was not nearly as good. It was by...
My favorite was Bob McLeod in issue 3.
Bob McLeod is one of the best artists in the industry. Yeah, number 3 had the best inks. George Pérez is a great inker, but he didn't quite mesh with Ron Frenz. But overall, I really did like the art. So, Josh, you like the art in this story then?
Yeah, particularly the third issue I thought was really good. The inking is phenomenal in that one. It's probably because of right now we're going through the 80s, but this really at times you can like feel the markers, the marker strokes in the coloring as well. I thought it was really great. It really feels like we're all reading this digitally, I assume. At least I was.
I have the originals, but yeah, I can see it now.
I can feel
Brag
the
about it.
paper reading it digitally. Like I can see that it's like an actual comic, where a lot of the stuff is like that we normally read are like shitty scans or recolorized ones, which are like there's no texture, there's nothing in it. It's so like almost clinical how it's been remastered. So this was like super refreshing, very clean. It's been a while since I haven't read something that was an 80s comic. I really like this art.
Adam, what do you think of the art in this story?
Oh, you know what? For the pencils, I love them. I thought they were such a breath of fresh air compared to pretty much every other time I've been on here. I have to say it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oops.
Yeah.
Really, the level of detail here is incredible. I always have issues when they don't have backgrounds in panels, and by and large, there are backgrounds in the vast majority of the panels here, so I appreciate that. I think the inking on all 3 issues is done competently. My favorite is actually issue 1. And I don't know, maybe I just have too much love for Pérez because I know I am a huge Pérez fan, but there's just something about the atmosphere of that first issue I really love.
Right.
The only issue I might have would be with the coloring. I feel the colors get a little bit muddied in certain sequences and can come across as a bit dull, which is a shame because otherwise I think the inking and the penciling is done extremely well. But I would say if for any reason to check out this miniseries, it would be for the artwork.
I'll say the original issues that I own are a little bit like, I think it's a problem with the scanning, where it's just one of those things where maybe the scanning was on a little bit too dark, but the original pages are actually a little bit brighter than this. So, but anyway.
Yeah, and the ones that we are reading are scans of the comics. These aren't like remastered ones.
Like fan scans, basically, yeah.
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 Right.
I do have issue number 1 from this, so I did have a chance to see the physical issue of that.
Okay.
So I feel there was some quality degradation from the scan, but not too much. I still say the colors can get a bit muddied, but otherwise beautiful art throughout it.
And if anyone's interested, these issues will be available soon at Jolie's comic book store at the Long Box in St. Thomas. But anyway, Jolie, what did you think of the art in this?
He wants you to know that he's reselling his
You're on mute.
Jolie,
Jolie, you're
muted.
muted.
Are we revealing for the first time here? A surprise reveal?
Oops.
Yeah, way to go.
Oh, Jolie, are you on mute? We can't hear you.
No, I'm not.
Oh,
I
okay.
was, but my
I edit that
audio
out?
would have picked it up. Since it's separate, thank God, right? So this whole time where I mute myself to burp or cough real loud, it's been picking up.
It's going to be in the original anyways.
Yeah.
It's fine though
do that.
because Parker snorts way louder than any of us can fart. So
I swear. He sleeps on the couch all day, and then when I start recording, it's like, all right, it's time to voice my opinion too.
yeah.
Yeah, he's part of the podcast. He has a lot
Honestly.
of opinions.
Yeah, he obviously is Team Ned Leeds. But anyway, I'll reiterate what I'll say what I said. That's Mike telling you where you can buy his old copies. But yeah, the big reveal is I'm doing that in February 2022. Also available online, shipping worldwide. Okay. The art was great. I, too, am a huge Pérez fan. I hate to see him inking not his pencils, but I like to see him inking. That's fine. I really enjoy his pencils. But, the foreshortening is, like, kind of stiff. The foreshortening is kind of stiff. And I think that might just be his inks on someone else's pencils. It's not totally his fault. But, yeah, I'm here for this art. I agree. The scans that we're reading of the digitals are kind of... I feel like someone upped the contrast to get the page white, and they just, like, sacrifice detail. Or the
blacks are definitely too crushed, so that's probably what they did. You're right.
Yeah. But, I mean, all in all, it was great. There's nothing, like, super crazy. Like, there was a lot of Spider-Man crotches, though, which, I mean, I'm not complaining about, just mentioning.
Yee.
Do we need a crotch tally now?
I mean, it's been a while. It's New Year.
I'll start counting.
New Year, new tally.
Perfect.
So there's at
New year,
least
new crotch.
3 in the first issue.
New crotch, who does?
But yeah.
Yeah. Bex Luthor, what'd you think of the art?
I didn't like it.
What? But you like everything.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that weird? I don't particularly enjoy this kind of comic style. I don't know what it is. Just something just doesn't vibe with me, and I totally understand that it's a me thing, because I understand that my tastes are personal and not
just objective truth.
yeah, not just objective truth. Like, it sucks because I don't like it.
Oh.
Ooh, why? No,
I have a lesson to learn. But anyway, go ahead.
I find the human faces a little grotesque, and I don't like to look at them. Like, anytime the Hobgoblin's drawn, 10 out of 10. Love that. And I think it works really well with the Hobgoblin. There's, like, a big splash of his face on, like, near the end of issue 2. That is, like, one of the dopest things. I think even, like, 6-year-old Becca was like, that's rad. And I still think it's rad. But I don't like the faces. I don't vibe with the look. It's just not my thing.
Now that you realize... go ahead.
I was gonna say, I like when things are pretty, and I don't think it's pretty.
Did you notice...
It could be technically very well done. I don't know that, because I'm not an artist, but it's just not for me.
Did you realize it was the same artist that was doing Amazing from about 252 to, like, 280? Like, all the ones we've been reviewing? Or did you not even notice?
No.
Oh, yeah, it's the same guy, yeah. I mean, it's obviously 10 years later, so style's changed a little bit, but...
Yeah, maybe the inks are too thick for me. There's like, where is it that I really don't like? It's
it doesn't feel the same. It definitely does not feel the same from what we're reading now to this. You could tell that the artist has changed. Like, Ron Frenz has changed a little bit.
Yeah, and near the beginning of issue 2, there's like a panel with J. Jonah's face, and he's very, like, angular cheeked. I just don't like that.
Okay.
That's just not my vibe. Which, it's okay.
I see that, yeah. I see that.
It's starting to take on, like, that 90s look. The 90s Image Comics look. In the facial sort of structures of the humans. But then you can see, I'm just, like, looking at this one panel of Mary Jane right before when they're, like, talking. They're looking over, like, the old crime photos of Ned Leeds. And her face is actually, like, quite beautiful, and so is her hairstyle. It's almost as if he forgot that he was drawing in the 90s and he was drawing in the 80s again. But George Pérez is inking in the 90s, so it's, like, right in there.
The thing is, I personally don't see any 90s influence, but, I mean, image influence. But the thing about Ron Frenz...
Oh, I didn't say there was influence. I said it's image-like.
Okay.
That's just my own assessment.
I get what you're saying, though. Like, it's not necessarily that it's like emulating Image, but you can tell that it's of that time when things are kind of, like, edgier and they've got this, like, 90s look to them. I don't know how else to describe it besides, like, a 90s look.
Yeah, they're
like,
if you extreme.
What was that run
like,
of...
you could tell what era this is from just by looking at it. I don't think you need to know what the issue is about or anything. You can flip through the pages and tell that it's from the era. Sorry, Jolie.
I think.
Oh no, it's okay. I was gonna say, what is that Green Arrow run where he has like the I agree with Josh. That's what I think I'm trying to say, or what is being said better is that it has a specific 90s feel, and a large part of that in art has to do with the fashion and the hairstyles. Mm-hmm. And I mean also the art style.
The one thing about Ron Frenz, I do like Ron Frenz, but he tends to, for example, when he was on Spider-Man, he was kind of emulating Steve Ditko. Then when he does Thor, he emulates Jack Kirby. So it's almost like he is a good artist, but he doesn't really have his own unique voice. And I think maybe at this point, maybe he was sort of unsure of how he should be drawing. He was sort of in between styles, Maybe that's part of the problem. But
I'm going to deviate here. I think this actually was an improvement. Because
I agree. No, I agree, Adam. I think it is better than his 80s stuff, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Although, I'm just going to say this, Bex, I want you to make your point, but I just can't get over how much this dude does look like Walter White on page 28 of his I keep expecting that's the big reveal. Anyway, sorry.
It's Walter White.
I'm just trying to say that.
Well, I was going to say, if you on issue 1, like the first page where Spidey's in the water, Hobgoblin mask, dope, rad. We keep going, Hobgoblin grabs him, it's Ned Leeds, skin melting, skeleton, dope, rad. That Peter Parker face, hate it. I hate it.
It's not great. Great.
It makes my skin crawl. I don't like it that much. Like, I just can't. Something about it disgusts me. And the fact that previously the melting skeleton face was not the thing that disgusts me. It's just Peter Parker's face. I just.
But you know what, though? If you go 3 or 4, 5 pages later, when J. Jonah Jameson is reading the newspaper, that's a great page. Like where J. Jonah Jameson's looking at a cigar and then his wife comes into the doorway and she's all in silhouette. That's a perfect melding of Ron Frenz and George Pérez right there, I think. Right, that's a great page.
Yeah, I think that Bex is right where like there are some like really messy faces, but I feel like you can look at any issue, even your favorite artists, you can flip through and find panels that you don't like. And I think just what Beck's saying is just this whole style is not for her. Mm-hmm. I don't think necessarily. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Bex, but I think what she's trying to say is that it's
But like the Hobgoblin, really cool. Mm-hmm. I think the art style for me works when it's trying to be grotesque. Mm-hmm. Or like scary, like Hobgoblin, skeletons, melting stuff, and it doesn't work for me when it's trying to be pretty Peter Parker, pretty boy, right? Like I just. Also, can we talk about the covers? Who did the covers for this?
George
and can they be?
Pérez.
He did. Yeah. I hate them. I hate them.
I was like George Pérez. Oh.
Okay. I absolutely despise the covers. Extra points because they're wraparounds. That gives you extra points. But if they weren't wraparounds, I'd be so pissed.
Oh, sorry, I'm wrong. It's drawn by Ron Frenz and inked by George Pérez. Just like the interior for number 1.
I don't like the MJ one. Like what Becca was saying with
it's Betty.
It's Betty Brant, yeah.
Oh, I can't tell between them. They both have red bobs now.
Yeah.
And their faces are the exact same, like in these comics.
Mary Jane is the one comic book girl that looks different from comic book girls. Yeah. So if you can't tell the difference between her and another comic book girl, bad news, Bear.
Yeah.
You know what? That number 3 cover looks like someone learned to draw human faces by looking at comic books and not at real people. Right? That's what that looks like to me. Mm-hmm.
And then you have this sick image of the Hobgoblin grabbing Spidey by the throat in the little corner over here. Like, what are you doing? Who taught you that was the appropriate thing to do for your Hobgoblin reveal issue 3? Here he finally is. He's in the corner like this big.
You know what I think it is it was drawn once for the cover and then flipped and they just changed it a bit. That's what it feels like. I think that's why it looks so grotesque, especially here.
It looks distorted. That's what it is.
Yeah, because if you cover up one and just look at the cover part of it, it looks fine.
Are you saying mirrored? Like they drew one half and mirrored?
It looks almost mirrored because if you just look at the one, it looks okay.
Because
that's
mirroring
awesome.
the Hobgoblin mask or the Spidey mask would be fine.
Yeah.
And then just shading it accordingly, right? But when you mirror a human woman's face, it looks weird because people aren't symmetrical.
Do you know what?
Spider-Man is.
And I hate to say this, I hate to speak poorly of George Pérez, but the second issue, I feel like the inks, I think it's Jerome Moore and Scott Hanna. Maybe it's just Jerome Moore. Mm-hmm. I feel like they work better with, wow.
Off.
No, Jolie, I agree with you. I kind of thought that. Like, when you get to the splash page with the Hobgoblin standing there, it kind of looks better. I know.
Oh, yeah. Like, the marriage between pencils, colors, and inks is much more complete. And makes a lot more sense.
That's the thing is, George Pérez is a great inker, but George Pérez's inks match his own pencils or someone like Kurt Swan, someone more subtle and subdued, like with body language. Ron Frenz is a Marvel style artist. He's like a Jack Kirby, John Buscema type. So the inks don't work. They don't mesh.
Yeah, and this guy is inking for the colorist. And that's, to me, the most important part. Because if you don't ink for the color, then the color looks like mud, like Adam was saying. And in this issue, I feel like even the color is more sophisticated. You get whole scenes where they're just like monochromatic duotones when they're flashbacks, and it makes sense in a flashback. And the colors are more vibrant. Like instead of being a muted dark red, it's a bright, bloody, vibrant red for Spider-Man. And it's like tones of orange. And the color palettes just all work together better. Like, where there's orange, there's blue. Like, there's complementary colors also all over the issue. And they're used as background accents. So, like, where JJJ is watching the newscast, the office and the newscast are blue and orange, which is just, like, background stuff. And then the people who are important or the people who are sitting inside the scenes, they are in colors, but also colors that don't interfere with the two colors that are, you know, being complementary and used to sort of wash out the background. And it's awesome. There's something about this. Issue 2 is not the best one, but is the most visually appealing.
So
I just got to say one thing.
Go ahead.
Hobgoblin is my favorite Spidey villain, purely for the way he looks.
Yeah.
Because that look is killer. I love that. And I have to say, I was feeling like this was an anticlimax with the reveal of who it actually was. I'm just going to ask a question for everyone. Were you satisfied with the reveal? Or do you wish it was another character that was revealed to be Hobby?
I personally am glad it was Roderick. Number one, because that's what Roger Stern intended. And number two, I think I know that you said you liked Jason McIndale. I never liked Jason McIndale. I didn't like the clumsy way that he was Jack-o'-lantern, and then in one issue he hired someone to kill Ned Leeds. Then he took over the identity, and I never really liked him. So I prefer Roderick Kingsley. Josh?
It's tough. I've always known that Roderick was Hobgoblin. Because when this came out, I was 2, so I was my first like introduction to Hobgoblin was probably Roderick Kingsley. Like I'm familiar with him already. So, but I feel like if I hadn't known and this was the reveal, it would have been pretty disappointing. For sure, because he's just not a character at this point. Hobgoblin is more of a character than Roderick Kingsley is. Now, I don't even know if that's changed.
Is it more disappointing than Amazing 289 that we just reviewed last week or 2 weeks ago? Because that was pretty freaking disappointing.
Where he's like, it was Ned Leeds, the Hobgoblin, and then he gets punched by 4 guys and dies.
I think
maybe they've just never done it right.
You know, I feel like that is more disappointing because there was an actual lead up of like years and years going to that point. This was like Was anybody clamoring for this at the time? Like, was anybody like, oh, come on, give us what we really want to see for the Hobgoblin? I feel like it was just like...
The Stern cut.
Yeah, hashtagging release the Stern cut. I mean, so I feel like it being just a 3-issue run is pretty inconsequential. Whether it was successful or not, I feel like it wasn't much of a risk because it didn't matter in the larger story of Spider-Man at the time. I'm sure obviously things changed, and I'm sure Roderick Kingsley comes back as Hobgoblin quite a bit, but if this didn't happen, Hobgoblin would have still come back in a different manner. So I feel like the other one is more disappointing, but I feel like this is just as much of a letdown. If you're just looking at them as like 3-issue run, I think it's the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
G.I. Julie, what do you think? Is it less disappointing, more disappointing? What do you think overall?
Like, it's hard to say because there's all this context, and it's like I don't want to appear to be taking sides, or because like I don't also care about whose side. Because it's like in Spider-Man, it sucks what happened. It really, do you know what? It really sucked. But that's the nature of comics, is that the ship is always handed to other people, and they sometimes sail it into the side of a cliff. It was just fortunate that he was able to like find all of the pieces of the ship and try to put them back together. Unfortunately, you know what? Whatever. I liked Ned Leeds being the Hobgoblin. And then him being dead. It was a very nice package. And to unpackage an already unwrapped package was kind of like petty and redundant.
Here's the thing. I'll say one thing. I don't like that Ned Leeds was killed the way he was and then replaced, but revealing it to be Ned Leeds was cool because Ned Leeds has been around since the 60s. So technically it was more dramatic that it was him.
Yeah, do you know what I will say, and this is maybe why I don't feel so attached to the Kingsley brothers, is that Ned Leeds being the Hobgoblin is more impactful to Spider-Man's character.
True.
And I think that's why I favor Ned Leeds as the being revealed as a Hobgoblin. Because like, who is this Kingsley to Peter? Nobody. He was revealed as somebody, like, as MJ's sugar daddy in, like, an issue. So...
Oh, no, it's another old rich white guy for Peter to fight. I mean, you know, there's only, like, a dozen of those.
Right?
He owns a company.
Ooh, we never heard of that before.
They're all trying to merge? What is this? Oh, my God. Anyway, yeah.
Bex Luthor, what do you think?
I'm with Josh on, like, the other one was more disappointing just because, like, the lead up to it is like I said last week, it was like, yeah, can't wait to change continuity forever and then not put any thought or care into it at all. So, like, that is little, like, and then they just kill him and then immediately replace him, and then we're like, oh, cool, whatever. The biggest disappointment for me is Betty Leeds spent so much time. She finds out her husband's Hobgoblin, grieves when he dies, has to then live with that fact, and then, never mind. Like, that just, it just, I feel bad for her character. Her character gets the shit end of the stick no matter what happens, which is unfortunate, but hey, it's women, it's comic books, and that's what happens.
Justice for Betty Leeds.
Do I like... Yeah. Betty deserves better, is my opinion on the whole thing. And it seemed like nobody cares about Betty in these. She's just Ned Leeds' wife. Sometimes the wife of the Hobgoblin, sometimes the wife of the guy got brain controlled by the Hobgoblin, but she's just there, and it just... That's her character, and that kind of sucks. Do I like Roderick Kingsley's character? I don't know anything about him. If this is what I read, I don't know who this guy is. Why do I care that he's the Hobgoblin? Do I like Ned Leeds? No. I also don't like Ned Leeds as a character, but at least I know who he is. It just... It's, like Julie was saying, it's an unfortunate situation no matter what happens, and people tried their best to fix it, and it didn't work, and that happens sometimes. So, and then it's comic books, so... Ned Leeds is alive anyway. Roderick Kingsley's also alive. They probably both died 3 times and come back to life. So really, who cares? Who's the Hobgoblin right now?
F if I know. I don't know.
Let's look it up.
It's Roderick Kingsley.
Is it? Is he the current Hobgoblin?
Well, it was him and the guy who was the new Green Goblin, the superhero Green Goblin, who then turned into a villain. Was that Ben Ulrich?
Yeah, that's Ben Ulrich, isn't? And I think he is. He's like Hell Goblin. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
Oh, Phil Ulrich.
Is that the one that?
Phil Ulrich. Sorry, thank
Is that the one that? Or no. It's Norman that takes the Carnage and becomes Red Goblin, right?
Yeah.
So that's not the same one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Philip Ulrich was Hobgoblin, though. Also,
It's lots of goblins, huh?
His name's Goblin King.
Oh, that's cool.
That's what it is.
I like that.
But yeah, there's a whole Goblin family, and I don't think any of them like each other. So that's fun. It's like the Flash family, but bad. But yeah, who's my favorite Hobgoblin? Lefty Donovan.
Of course. Gotta be different.
The worst one.
Let's just not give
I
him
don't
an
know.
identity. Let's just leave him as Hobgoblin. You never have to explain who the Joker was. Just leave the Hobgoblin as the Hobgoblin
Honestly.
and a dangling mystery forever.
Well, if you go onto the Marvel Wiki, in the Hobgoblin section, there's 6 people who've been the Hobgoblin. Lefty Donovan, Ned Leeds, Jason McIndale, Daniel Kingsley, currently deceased. Sometimes he dressed up as the Hobgoblin. Phil Ulrich, and an unnamed male who was the Hobgoblin. He's the 5th Hobgoblin in Secret War.
Oh, in Secret Wars, the original?
No, Secret War.
Oh, yeah, I don't care.
The 2004 comic book.
All right.
Yeah, you know what? I think I'm with Adam. I think my favorite Hobgoblin is when we didn't know who the Hobgoblin was. Not after it was revealed to be Ned Leeds, not Roderick. It's before, when we didn't know who it was. He was like menacing and evil, and like at the time it felt like there was a plan for him, and he was actually doing things instead of like backtracking on things that should have just been done in the first place.
Well, it's like the Joker, right?
Yeah.
Like when they try to give the Joker a backstory, it ruins him.
Absolutely.
Stop giving him a name. His name's not Jack. His name's, I don't care. Shut up. He's just a guy.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who he was. It matters what he's doing now. That's the point.
Well, that also applies to Boba Fett, right? The more they explain, the less appealing he is.
I don't vibe with that. Boba Fett's hot.
Anyway, okay. So I guess the last question is, do we recommend this? And not only am I going to say will we read it again, but will we want to read more? Because there is another Roger Stern story that came out right after this called Goblins at the Gate that I've got queued up. I'm going to read it. So, Josh, do you recommend this story?
I surprisingly had fun reading this. But again, I think I was just kind of like wrapped up in the whole Hobgoblin story. I was wrapped up in like the behind the scenes story of Roger Stern finally getting to tell his story, which is really great. So like I had fun reading it, but it's not a good story. So I feel like if you're kind of like in the know and you want to know maybe a little bit more about the Hobgoblin or the history of him, it's a must read. If you're just a comic book fan and don't really know, I don't think I'd go out of my way to recommend this to you because it's not a good story, but it's a good it's a good moment in comic book history, specifically Marvel history and Roger Stern as a writer. So that's my weird answer. That I don't know if that actually.
It's kind of like a Star Wars Disney sequel, right? It's like, well, it reminds me of Star Wars, so that's good.
Yeah.
But is it actually good? I don't know. I don't think it is. Maybe.
Yeah, fans will like it, but everybody else probably not.
Right. Okay, Adam, what do you think?
I'm on the fence. On one hand, I do really like the art. On the other hand, I think it's a sloppy story. I mean, would I recommend it for someone to kind of just understand who the Hobgoblin is and introduce them to this character? Not really, because I don't really get who the Hobgoblin is naively getting into this story if I'm trying to separate all the other issues of Spider-Man I've read, all the other media depicting Hobgoblin, I wouldn't have a clear view of why this villain was such a big deal. And honestly, for Hobgoblin being this really cool-looking villain, there just were not enough badass moments for him in this comic series. I would say check it out for the art, but that would be about it.
All right. G.I. Jolie?
I concur. Please check out the art. We're going on 2 hours. I really can't say anything else.
Okay. Bex Luthor, what do you think?
The spider on my wall is getting closer to me with every second. It's freaking me out. Here's the thing. The most important comic book history moments are often bad. Or rushed, or not thought out. And for some reason, they alter the history of everything that we know. So if you like comic books, I would say read it, because it does. And reading it right after the whole Ned Leeds thing is interesting.
Right.
Like, the thing is interesting. The story's interesting, if maybe not great, but also like just for continuity's sake. Like, it's interesting.
Right.
Is it a good, like, am I gonna be like, somebody's like, oh, I like Spider-Man, what do you think I should read? Am I gonna give them Spider-Man Hobgoblin Lives? No. That to start off with? No, but if you're interested in Spidey's villain's history, sure. It's like, am I ever gonna tell somebody to read Secret Wars? I mean, no, because I like to keep my friends. But Secret Wars, the symbiote suit came from Secret Wars. The Beyonder came from Secret Wars. Like, so much of comic book history came from something so shitty. So, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Read it or don't, I don't care. Do whatever you want. You're gonna anyway.
Okay.
You know, I think you're totally right. It is way more impactful reading this right after reading about the reveal of Ned. I feel like maybe I would feel differently if it wasn't right after that.
Right.
So, again, it's like, who cares at this point?
Now imagine being me and waiting 10 years.
Absolutely not.
But at the time, I did love it, so it worked on me. But anyway.
I liked a lot of things as a kid that I went back as an adult and went, oh, God. No.
Well, anyway, that wraps up this week's episode, guys. That also wraps up the saga of the original Hobgoblin, right? When we get back to our regularly scheduled Spidey books, we're back to Jason Macendale, right, for a few years here. So that'll be interesting. We'll see how that plays out. We're like,
do they talk about Ned Leeds at all after that?
Yeah, I'm
or
sure
do they just
do.
like
they
go?
mention him. I'm sure they do. I don't remember.
Every time that Peter has a solemn moment and thinks about Gwen, he'll think about Ned too.
There you go. We want to thank Adam for helping us out, dropping in the last minute, filling in for Andrew. Thank you so much, Adam. We know you're a big Hobgoblin fan, so it kind of worked out, right?
Perfect. And I do want to thank you. I am a Hobgoblin fan, if nothing for the aesthetic. So it's always good talking about hobby in any iteration. Guys, thank you so much.
For sure. We'll have you on again soon. Make sure to join us next week when we review Web of Spider-Man 28, featuring a fill-in story. Yeah, by Bob Layton, though, and Steve Geiger. That'll be interesting. Also, Spectacular Spider-Man 128, the return of the Black Cat in yet another costume. A third costume since we started reviewing. Woo! And Amazing Spider-Man 290, where Peter Parker pops the question to Mary Jane Watson. This is a big one.
The viewers can't.
Wait, he proposes in the next issue?
Next issue.
They're not dating.
Exactly. Isn't that funny how comic books work? Yep. We'll talk about that next week. And to help us review these comics, guess who's coming back? None other than Cousin Brandon.
Ooh, that'll be fun.
We never figured out whose cousin he was.
No,
we did.
He's all our cousins.
He's not anyone we know's cousin. He's some football player's cousin. Right, Julie?
Yes.
So he has a cousin.
He is someone's cousin, just not our cousin.
Someone's
But anyway,
cousin Brandon.
So there you go.
He's someone's cousin.
So we want to.
All someone's cousin, one way or another.
That's true.
Not necessarily.
So yeah, I want to thank G.I. Jolie and Bex Luthor for joining us. And Josh, you can take it from here.
Sorry, hold on, Josh. I want to thank Adam's cat.
Yeah. Adam's cat. Let's shout out to Adam's cat. Sorry, we love cats here.
We do. We also want to thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. It really helps when you leave us a review over on Apple Podcast, or you can drop us a line on Twitter at HCT Spidercast. Please let us know what you guys think about the issues we're talking about and the podcast itself. Let's keep that comics conversation going.
That's right. So until next Monday, see you later.